Meet FBI asset Abdussadir Sheikh, who is still living in California. In 2000, he was a 65-year-old Indian-born Muslim claiming he had a doctorate and occasionally taught English at local community colleges. Fox News could not confirm where he taught English and where he got his degree. While the congressional inquiry wrote about Sheikh, the 9/11 Commission did not, even though Commission investigators interviewed him.
In a sense, he was doing for the United States what Bayoumi was doing for Saudi Arabia. So you had the anomaly of two of the future hijackers living in the home of a paid FBI asset.
Did he ever report these people to the FBI?
He told me that he mentioned their first names.
He was one of the several people that was never made available to our inquiry.
Why did the FBI deny you access?
The asset program was so sensitive that they didn't want to have any disclosure. Now, I found that to be a rather disingenuous answer, given the fact that this man was being paid rather handsomely. In fact, he got a severance payment of $100,000 from the FBI at the end of this, and yet had two of the hijackers living in his home and apparently never told anybody. And then there was a lot of negotiation, which at one point had Sheikh saying, "I will testify if you, the joint inquiry, will give me immunity from any future prosecution."
I think the only thing you can conclude is that he felt that he had very damaging information.
Yeah, that he wanted immunity from something, and that something had to do with his relationship with these two hijackers.
Did you ever speak to the FBI director, Robert Mueller, about that block?
Absolutely, and he's the one who said the reason that we're not giving you access to Sheikh is because our asset program is very valuable and we cannot have any outside intrusion into it.
Did you feel that was an honest answer?
Well, that was the director's answer.
Did the hijackers use a mirror network across the country? Another group of characters always there to help. And are these networks still in place in America today? We continue our investigation with Eric Shawn.
The cold face of 33-year-old Egyptian Mohammed Atta is seared into memory. He would crash American Airlines Flight 11 into the World Trade Center's North Tower.
Atta is the ringleader. He clearly knew everything and everybody and what their roles were.
Atta had been handpicked by 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to be the lead hijacker. Using multiple names, he had lived as a student in Cairo and here in Hamburg, Germany. June 2000, a key time of movement. Midar left San Diego, moving out of the home he shared with FBI asset Sheikh. And it was a temporary goodbye to local imam Anwar al-Awlaki. Experts say Midar headed to Yemen to recruit other muscle hijackers. And Atta, with a multiple entry visa, touched down in Florida, having flown there from Prague and the Czech Republic via Newark, New Jersey. His first stop was Venice, Florida, on the state's Gulf Coast, where he settled with 23-year-old Marwan al-Shihi, the pilot who would fly United Flight 175 into the World Trade Center's South Tower. Already there was a Lebanese man, 26-year-old Zaid Jarrah. He would crash United Flight 93 into the ground in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Atta and Jarrah made this video together as their last will and testament. And as in San Diego, all started taking flying lessons. Atta was constantly on the move, flying to Spain in January 2001. After his return, he and Sheikh moved again into this apartment in Coral Springs, just outside Miami. Were they using a support network which had been in place in America for decades?
What you have in terms of a support system are another layer of people who kind of know what these guys are about, but don't want to ask a lot of questions.
Andrew McCarthy was the lead prosecutor in the World Trade Center bombing of 1993.
To the extent that they can give them some help, you know, whether it's with housing or money or jobs or training, they can later tell whoever asked them about it they were simply fulfilling their obligation as Muslims to help other Muslims.
One person in Florida who seemed to fit that bill was a then 26-year-old chemistry major, who now has a $5 million price tag on his head for his alleged role in Al-Qaeda today. He had grown up in the epicenter of radical Islam here in America.
Adnan Shukrajuma is a Saudi. He was born in Saudi Arabia and came to this country during the 1980s with his family.
Shukrajuma's father was a man by the name of Sheikh Gulsher Shukrajuma.
Gulsher Shukrajuma was a translator for the blind sheikh.
This is the Brooklyn Mosque, which was home to the hardcore Islamic Egyptian cleric Omar Abdel Rahman. The cleric was blinded in childhood by diabetes.
He had given the fatwa for the killing of Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt in the early 1980s.
His successor, Hosni Mubarak, arrested hundreds, including the blind sheikh and a 31-year-old firebrand, Dr. Ayman Zawahiri.
What was the relationship between the blind sheikh and Zawahiri?
In part, rivals. Zawahiri is running an Egyptian terrorist organization called Egyptian Islamic Jihad, and around the same time that Abdul Rahman is running the Islamic group.
Released from prison, these two rivals would initially go their separate ways. Zawahiri ventured to Pakistan, where he met up with Osama bin Laden. The blind sheikh chose America and arrived in 1990.
By the time he got here, he was already a superstar in the jihadist pantheon.
Why did we let him in?
That's the $64 zillion question. One office is trying to keep him out as a terrorist, the other one is giving him a green card as a religious worker. I'd call it a comedy of errors if it hadn't had such a tragic outcome. The blind sheikh did these fundraising tours through the United States.
In another secret of 9/11, this FBI document, written just weeks after the attacks, withheld the name of a man who, quote, in October 1992, hosted a party for Sheikh Omar Rahman. The Congressional Joint Inquiry into 9/11, however, names the party host.
Mr. Bosnan is named.
Osama Bosnan, a Saudi national who 8 years later would be in San Diego, and according to investigators, a close associate of Omar Bayoumi. Yes, the very same man who signed the lease for the hijackers and threw them a party. But back in 1990, the blind sheikh inspired another mission. November 5th, 1990, gunshots ring out in a New York hotel. El Said Nosair, a follower of the blind sheikh at the Brooklyn Mosque, guns down Rabbi Meir Kahana. Shannon Taylor was an eyewitness and took these photographs.
Out of nowhere came some person who shot him right here, and the bullet came right out like that. He'd been practicing for years. He was part of the blind sheikh's cadre of leaders.
3 years later, another follower of the blind sheikh, Ramzi Youssef, drove a van filled with explosives into the garage of the World Trade Center.
One of the real miracles that I think has ever happened in the modern history of the world is that only 7 lives were lost in the World Trade Center attack.
In October 1995, the blind sheikh was convicted of terrorism and sent to prison. But that personal translator and his family, including son Adnan, moved to South Florida.
There was another terrorist cell linked to the blind sheikh and Al-Qaeda that was based in the Fort Lauderdale area. And that was the community in which Adnan Shukrajuma was growing up.
New details of the hijackers' movements in Arizona, Florida, Virginia, Connecticut, and New Jersey. And why was Anwar al-Awlaki invited to lunch at the Pentagon shortly after the attacks of 9/11?
By the spring of 2001, the key figures in the 9/11 plot were well established in America. Besides taking 727 flight simulator lessons at Opelika Airport, ringleader Mohammed Atta and his cohort Marwan al-Shehi moved into this apartment in Coral Springs, Florida, just north of Miami. And living in this house in nearby Miramar was Adnan Shukrajuma, who was raised in America because his father was the blind sheikh's translator.
Adnan Shukrajuma goes to school at Broward Community College.
Here he is giving a class presentation at the college, but experts say he wasn't only pursuing an education.
During the late 90s, Shukrajuma had been approached by a local Muslim who was trying to put together a terrorist cell.
Adnan Shukrajuma was recruited to be in that plot, but got spooked by it.
The FBI believed that he may have sniffed out their informant, and instead he went to Pakistan and trained there.
After allegedly training with Al-Qaeda, Adnan was back in South Florida, and so were Atta and Shehi. Buried on the last page of this declassified 9/11 Commission document is a mention that Adnan and Ada were together on May 2, 2001, 4 months before the attacks.
An immigration officer who said that Ada and another man and Shukrajuma came into their office. The person said she was 75% sure that Shukrajuma was with Ada.
Shortly after, Shukrajuma disappeared, likely in Pakistan.
He's the alleged al-Qaeda operational chief right now.
Adnan Shukrajuma is a trained operative who poses an operational threat to the United States.
With Shukrajima, you see almost a 20-year history here, going back to the mosque in Brooklyn, going to Florida, and then allegedly being with Muhammad Ada.
Right, exactly right.
Secrets of 9/11 lay deep in America's Southwest.
Al-Qaeda has had a presence in Arizona almost since Al-Qaeda was founded.
Honjur's connections to Arizona run far deeper than obviously any of the others.
Now at the Goldwater Institute, Mark Flatten has been an investigative reporter in Arizona for over 28 years.
He had been here in, I believe, '91, taking classes at the University of Arizona.
In fact, during the 9 years between 1991 and 2000, Saudi national Hani Hanjour, pilot of Flight 77 that hit the Pentagon, moved in and out of Arizona at least 3 times, studying English and taking flying lessons.
A lot of people who have been connected subsequently to terrorism had been to the Tucson area, had studied in the Tucson area.
People such as Wadi al-Hajj,
who was one of the very first members of Al-Qaeda,
and who's now in prison for the 1998 bombings of the U.S. embassies in Africa. But back in the 80s, he was plane shopping for bin Laden in the Grand Canyon State.
Wadi al-Hajj asked another American citizen to purchase a plane on behalf of Osama bin Laden. Went to a location in Arizona, it was called a boneyard, which sold old surplus military and other used aircraft, and bought a fairly large cargo jet for bin Laden.
This is the plane bought for bin Laden.
It was transported to Sudan, and subsequently they crashed the plane.
The deep roots of Islamic extremism in Arizona remain a secret of 9/11.
The FBI and CIA, in fact, issued a joint intelligence report that designated Arizona as a long-term nexus for Al-Qaeda. I was able to obtain a copy of that report through the Freedom of Information Act, but everything except the headers were deleted.
But Phoenix FBI Special Agent Ken Williams was suspicious.
Agent Williams gained a great deal of notoriety because of the Phoenix Memo, which he actually authored in July of 2001.
Describing several flight schools in Arizona that had an unusually large number of Middle Eastern students training there, particularly Saudis.
The memo states Osama bin Laden is trying, quote, to establish a cadre of individuals who will be in a position in the future to conduct terror activity against civil aviation targets. The declassified parts of the memo don't name Hanjour or Hazmi, but does mention Zachariah Subra, a radicalized 24-year-old Lebanese national.
Subra, he was a disciple or an advocate of Osama bin Laden.